The state of Tennessee tells parents not to watch their children's online classes. This after proposing that state agents must visit every single family home in the state of Tennessee to perform health and wellness checks. So in Tennessee, we'll invade your homes while you are forbidden to watch your kids' online classes. Are you beginning to understand now why so many are using the word fascism when describing modern public schools? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we sit down with our international correspondent, Alex Newman, to discuss the great state of Tennessee and their latest attempt to keep parents from watching kids' online classes. But first, Katie is kicking things off by looking at the health of our republic.
Well, team, another convention is in the books. We're going to get to all of it with the good, the bad, and the so very Trumpian of the Republican National Convention. Wait a minute. Is Donald J. Trump still president? Why, yes, he is. So that means the media's heads have collectively exploded on this day that ends in Y. And of course, the RNC convention added a bit more pizzazz to the extent of the mass crying. Especially on the final night, when President Trump gave his pitch for why he should remain president for the next 4 years.
I profoundly accept this nomination for President of the United States.
I want to hear from you. What was the best moment of the convention? Let me know in the comments below. Now, before we get to all that is Trump, and there is plenty, let's look at some highlights from the past few nights, including the very personal moments from some of those who support President Trump and who simply do not want to see the country burn. We're going to start with the most gut-wrenching testimony from Ann Dorn, the widow of retired St. Louis police captain Dave Dorn, who was senselessly killed during the looting and riots in the city in June.
As I slept, looters were ransacking the shop. They shot and killed David in cold blood, and then live streamed his execution and his last moments on earth. David's grandson was watching the video on Facebook in real time, not realizing he was watching his own grandfather dying on the sidewalk.
And there was testimony from Carl and Marcia Mueller, parents of Kayla Mueller, who was taken hostage by ISIS. You may remember her name was given to the operation that resulted in the killing of Iraqi terrorist and ISIL leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Kayla was born a miracle. We were told we would never have a second child. But God gave us Kayla, and she gave herself to the world. 8 months into Kayla's captivity, another hostage was able to smuggle out a letter Kayla had written. As we read it, we could see that God was holding her in his arms. In her words, she felt tenderly cradled in free fall. She also wrote, "I have been shown in darkness light and have learned that even in prison one can be free. I am grateful. I have had many hours to think how only in your absence have I finally, at 25 years old, come to realize your place in my life. None of us could have known it would be this long, but no, I am also fighting for my side in the ways I am able, and I have a lot of fight left inside of me. I am not breaking down, and I will not give in, no matter how long it takes."
On night 3, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany spoke about her family's history with breast cancer and a preventative mastectomy she had, along with the support she received from the president.
On May 1st, 2018, I followed in my mother's footsteps, choosing to get a preventative mastectomy. I was scared. The night before, I fought back tears as I prepared to lose a piece of myself forever. But the next day, with my mom, dad, husband, and Jesus Christ by my side, I underwent a mastectomy. I expected to have the support of my family, but I had more support than I knew. As I came out of anesthesia, one of the first calls I received was from Ivanka Trump. As I recovered, my phone rang again. It was President Trump calling to check on me. I was blown away. Here was the leader of the free world caring about my circumstance.
But with the good, the caring, and the honest, then comes the media to ruin it all. At one point on night 3, the New York Times reported that the 3 cable networks had stopped airing the convention and went to their own commentary. I get it. CNN has been so busy with blatantly lying about the hellscape that is Kenosha, Wisconsin right now. They had to get their tingles by hearing their own voices instead of watching anybody but themselves in the camera. Cue Wolf Blitzer. As you can see, someone at CNN probably got fired for telling the truth in this chyron when it said 8 p.m. curfew ordered after violent protests over police shooting of unarmed black man in Wisconsin. All you have to do is wait just 5 seconds, and poof, the violence disappears. And to add fuel to the flames, yes, pun intended, CNN now says it's just fiery, but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting.
What you are seeing now, these images came and come in stark contrast to what we saw over the course of the daytime hours in Kenosha and into the early evening, which were largely peaceful demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more contentious. Things were thrown.
Please disperse! Nothing to see here, please!
I had to use it again. Leslie Nielsen should be hired as a reporter for any and all networks. They certainly don't care about trying to cover their biases or blatant disregard for allowing American people to decide for themselves if they would like to support the Republicans. Here's a new chyron that can be used always, thereby eliminating the confusion. CNN is a garbage heap and defender of chaos, but otherwise a great news organization. But the media does fact checks, you know, even if they are loaded with bile. Like after South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem said this.
From Seattle and Portland to Washington and New York, Democrat-run cities across this country are being overrun by violent mobs. The violence is rampant. There's looting, chaos, destruction, and murder. People that can afford to flee have fled, but the people that can't, good, hardworking Americans, are left to fend for themselves.
MSNBC's Rachel Maddow in her crocodile tears. Please interject.
As we've said over the course of this coverage, we will interject when we feel like there's something that's important and deliberate and very wrong that should be corrected just so that we feel responsible about our broadcast.
Oh, this should be rich.
And to essentially run a reality check on that assertion is the mayor of the great city of Seattle, Jenny Durkin, who's joining us on short notice.
Seattle is it is a city that I raised my 2 children in, and I would not have raised them anywhere else.
Oh, you did? And did you take them to Chaz Chop, too, and let them sleep out on the streets and pick up all the drug needles and the feces spread everywhere? Didn't think so. And then the New York Times simply couldn't fathom what was happening for the 4 nights and found everything interesting. Just dumbfounding. Almost as astounding as when a White House correspondent from PBS named Yamiche Alcindor was so offended by Madison Cawthorn, a 25-year-old House candidate from North Carolina. Madison has been confined to a wheelchair since an accident when he was 18. He did this on the stage.
I say to Americans who love our country, young and old, be a radical for freedom. Be a radical for liberty. And be a radical for our republic, for which I stand. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all.
The action of Cawthorn standing was so offensive that Alcindor took to Twitter. Madison Cawthorn made it a point to stand, suggesting that all Americans, too, should stand during the Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem. It was a direct rebuke of actions by people, including black athletes who are currently sitting out games, protesting police brutality. Is your jaw on the floor as well? Let's remember, she works for PBS, Public Broadcasting Service. What kind of service are they doing for anyone? Since I won't give them my money, here's my tip for the service Alcindor just provided. Get a new job. And the New York Times had to complain again about social distancing and masks. It seems as if science reporter Catherine Wu was only invited to comment on that. As you can see, she can't stop, won't stop, and neither will her colleagues. This is the breaking news email they sent out after Trump's speech. Oh, the mostly maskless audience. But enough of the media. Let's get to all things Trumpian. Over the course of the 4 days, President Trump appeared sporadically, almost like your father does at the cool party you're trying to host, and he acts all casual like, What's up, everybody? Except it's highly unlikely that when your father enters the room, Hail to the Chief is being played. And then there was classic Trump riffing.
And thank everybody in that whole beautiful post office system. We appreciate it.
And I contracted COVID in late March and recovered.
That means we don't have to be afraid of you at all, right?
I'm good to
Once
go.
you're recovered, you know, we have the whole thing with plasma happening. That means your blood is very valuable. You know that, right? Then I turned to MSDNC, as I call it. MSDNC, which is truly, it is a branch of the Democrats. It's right. It's a, I wouldn't say fully owned corporation, but it's certainly a fully controlled, or they control them. Nobody really knows who's controlling who. How can the Democrat Party ask to lead our country when it spends so much time tearing down our country? From the moment I left my former life behind, and it was a good life, we took an already owned existing building in a better location. Real estate deal, right? Everybody gets a lawyer. Come on over to our country. Everybody has a lawyer. We have a lawyer for you. That's what we need, is more lawyers. Now they're starting to mention it because their poll numbers are going down like a rock in water. The fact is, I'm here. What's the name of that building?
And you know there had to be specific Trumpisms dedicated to Joe Biden because, duh.
Joe Biden is weak. Joe Biden's agenda is made in China. My agenda is made in the USA. Wouldn't it be a kick in the ass if I lost and Sleepy Joe is president and this thing kicks in right about soon? For 47 years, Joe Biden took the donations of blue-collar workers, gave them hugs and even kisses.
While following the actual speech, Trump got in a few sound bites that Joe Biden probably wishes he could have come up with if he knew where he was or what he was doing.
Because we understand that America is not a land cloaked in darkness. America is the torch that enlightens the entire world. Democrat politicians refuse to protect innocent life, and then they lecture us about morality and saving America's soul. Tonight, we proudly declare that all children, born and unborn, have a God-given right to life. For America, there is a dream, and it is not beyond your reach. Together we are unstoppable. Together we are unbeatable. Because together we are the proud citizens of the United States of America.
With the conventions now complete, we're just waiting with bated breath for any and all debates to commence. Otherwise, it's now on you to decide, do you want America to burn, or do you want hope for a better tomorrow? Until next time, stay healthy, America.
Back again with our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Duke.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you can explain when old Rocky Top, when Tennessee decided to lose its ever-loving mind. Last week we did a story about how the governor of Tennessee was allowing the Department of Education in Tennessee to send surrogates into every single home to do health and wellness checks on the kids. The outrage, in large part to your article, was so extreme that the governor's office, the Department of Education, backed off. Now, as if that's not enough, the state of Tennessee is warning parents, we don't want you to watch your kids' online classes. We want you to sign a contract, a document that says you won't watch us teach your kids.
It's pretty incredible, Duke, and they seem to have it exactly backwards, right? The government in Tennessee thinks that they get to come into your home, they get to interview your children, make sure their needs are being met and that they're healthy and well and they have enough devices to keep them brainwashed and all the rest of it. But when you want to see what the government is exposing your children to, so, oh, no, we need you to sign this form here saying that no outside observers are going to be watching the classroom. I mean, it is so asinine. Then they came out with this, oh, we're just trying to protect the privacy of other students. That's a bunch of baloney. They're trying to protect their indoctrination. And we've had a whole bunch of educators just over the last few weeks, Duke, publicly fretting about, oh my goodness, parents are going to see us brainwashing their kids with LGBT propaganda, with race mongering, with social justice baloney, with Marxism. They're openly out there worried about even left-wing parents. They're saying even liberal parents, we got to be concerned because we're trying to disrupt and destabilize a child's homophobia and racism or whatever. This is just, it's beyond the pale. And Tennessee seems to have been chosen to be kind of a test state. You know, they have Lamar Alexander. It's a very conservative state, but very strange things are happening there right now.
Well, Lamar Alexander has been on the wrong side of every every reform issue in education going back 15 years. I mean, supporter of Common Core, the all of that stuff. Every aspect of it, Lamar Alexander has his grubby little fingers all over. So it may be a conservative state, and people may think that Lamar Alexander is a conservative legislator, but not when it comes to education. He's not. And last week we told you about how they were trying to get their surrogates into your house. The week before that, we were talking about Matthew Kay, who is one of those activists, education activists living in Philadelphia, who actually came out and wrote a series of tweets in which he was talking about how dangerous it is to let parents know what we're doing. Very concerned about what impact parents will have on our efforts, as you said, to destabilize kids, to separate the kids from their parents with regards to the way they viewed sexuality and all the issues that the progressives care about. Basically admitted flat out, he was African American, admitted flat out that this is really reprogramming your kids. We are programming your kids in a very different way than the parents would like, and we can't let them watch and see.
Yeah, and that's their attitude. When last week we talked about this program to invade people's homes and talk to the children, and over again, Commissioner of Education, Penny Schwinn, was saying these are our children, right? We're going to check on our children. And they have it exactly backwards. These are not the government's children, right? Hitler thought the children belonged to him. Stalin thought the children belonged to him. Mao thought the children belonged to him. Civilized, free people do not have, government-owned children, right? Free people have families where the parents are in charge of the upbringing and the education of the children. But something big is happening in Tennessee. It's very clear. Once they got exposed for this thing that, nobody should be allowed to watch the thing, they actually came back and they said, okay, well, if you insist, we'll let you watch. But no recording, right? Absolutely no recording or documenting anything of what we're doing. And the reason why I think is very obvious. They're worried that some parent will record what's going on. It'll end up on YouTube. It'll become a national scandal that the poor kids are being bombarded with left-wing social justice propaganda, and then they'll be in trouble. That's what they want to avoid, and that's what's going on here.
Well, we talked even before Matthew Kay, even before they tried to get their families, their agents into your schools. We talked about Elizabeth Bartholet at Harvard University and how they want to, on the other side of that flip side of that coin, not only do they want to teach your kids what they're going to teach them in opposition to what you would teach them, they don't want you to even see it. They're coming after homeschooling, right? That your kids are our kids. Not only are we going to teach them what they want, no matter what you think, we're going to tell you not to pay attention. We're going to send our agents to your homes, and we're going to eliminate your ability to homeschool your kids because it's dangerous to children.
That's what they believe. And frankly, I think this attitude, this ideology is extremely dangerous. We've seen where it leads. It always produces tragedy. These totalitarians must be resisted.
After the break, we're going to go a little bit more in depth. Back again with Alex Newman, our international correspondent, to continue this really important discussion about who owns your kids. Because in Tennessee, it's obvious that the Department of Education people and even the governor have acceded to the idea that Tennessee kids belong to the schools, not to the moms and dads, not to anybody. We want the right to be able to infiltrate your homes if we have to. So talk a little bit more broadly, Alex. I mean, the Tennessee situation is horrifying. First of all, how are the parents reacting to this in Tennessee, and what does this bode for the future of public education?
Yeah, parents were furious, obviously. I mean, it became such an enormous scandal. Even the mainstream newspaper there, the Tennessee Star, that first got these documents and published them, called this a Big Brother-style program where the government was going to come and interview all the children. So you have outrage among liberals, conservatives, centrists, all of it. People are appalled by this, but it's part of a much broader pattern, Duke. And, you know, we reported last week the home invasion thing where they were going to go check on the well-being of your child. That was actually being funded by a federal grant through the Centers for Disease Control. And a lot of this is coming down from the federal level. That's why I think Tennessee is probably a pilot state here. But, you know, in the final years of the Obama administration, the Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services put out a policy document where they actually said that parents would get to be equal partners with the government in the raising of their own children, but they must submit to mandatory home visits and parenting classes and all these Big Brother programs that really makes the parents the junior partners. Yeah, we'll let you feed them. Yeah, we'll let you give them good night hugs and read them a story maybe, but it's subject to these terms and conditions that Big Brother has imposed. And that's the direction this is going. And interestingly, it's the same direction that totalitarian governments all throughout the 20th century have pursued.
Yeah, one of the hardest things to get through to parents 7, 10, 9 years ago when we were desperately fighting Common Core was the idea that this isn't just a curriculum, it's not just a pedagogy, it's not just a new idea. This is something that was going to funnel all of the decision-making ultimately to the federal government, right? And no doubt about it, when you look at what's happened here and you see how Common Core was really that Trojan horse that effectively did away with local control in a meaningful sense of that word, effectively did away with the rights of individual parents and individual school districts to chart their own courses. Oh yeah, they all still pay lip service to that, right? You can do what you want. Oh, but here are the consequences if you don't do what we want you to do. You can do what you want, we're just not going to pay you, we're not going to fund you.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, the ESSA, I think, is a really good example of what we're talking about here. The Every Student Succeeds Act. Actually, Lamar Alexander, the Republican senator from Tennessee, was the main pusher of this monstrosity in the Senate. And what they did was they told parents, hey, this is going to restore local control. This is going to bring the power back to the state governments over the education system. In fact, it did exactly the opposite. When it reached Obama's desk, they couldn't believe it. They said this is a Christmas miracle. The education secretary said every element of Obama's education agenda has now been enshrined into federal law for the first time. It actually cemented Common Core in place under the guise of removing Common Core. So we're moving constantly in this direction. It's even continuing under the Trump administration. And unless we hit the brakes, we're going to wake up and find in the not too distant future that the government owns our children rather than the parents. And there is nobody, and I mean nobody, who loves children more than their parents. So even if we assume good intentions on the part of these bureaucrats, these totalitarians that want to hijack child rearing, we must understand God gave children to parents for a reason. God programmed parents to love. I mean, even if you're an atheist and you just believe in biological evolution or whatever, your parents are programmed to love the child more than anybody else on the planet. So this is a dangerous idea on every front. It's part of a broader program, and it must be resisted.
The ESSA, really great that you brought that up. That was passed in December of 2015, the year before the presidential election. You mentioned Lamar Alexander, and Paul Ryan was the other group. Wisconsin was the big driver of this. And what they did is, rather than fight Barack Obama, they handed him, before the election, everything that he wanted so that no one could contest it afterwards. And what's happening under the Trump administration is what happened under the ESSA. All this was passed under Obama, thanks to the Republicans in the House and Senate. So Trump inherited this system. He hasn't fixed it. I'm not even sure Donald Trump would know what to look for to fix it. He's got his mind on so many other things. Really is a tragedy. Your final thoughts, Alex?
Well, hopefully in the second Trump administration term, assuming there is one, we can start tackling this monster, because this thing is going to devour our families and our children and our nation if we're not careful.
It's time now Now for some real education. The Starry Night is perhaps the most famous painting by Dutch post-impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh. Painted in June 1889, it shows the view from the east-facing window of his asylum room at Saint-Remy-de-Provence, just before sunrise, with the addition of an imaginary village. It has been in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City since 1941. Widely regarded as Van Gogh's magnum opus, The Starry Night is one of the most recognized paintings in the history of Western culture.
And it's one of my favorites as well. Have it up on in the house. We'll take a look at the picture. It is gorgeous. I mean, it's evocative. And when you think about this, Van Gogh was in Provence because he was undergoing sanitarium treatment. He was literally at the Saint-Remy-de-Provence, stood in for a sanatorium. He had just attempted to cut part of his ear off, his desperate attempt to connect with a particular woman that he thought he had a future with, and his deep despair. We know that it's legendarily, we know that he suffered deeply from depression. May also, we talked about Caravaggio the other day, like Caravaggio, may have been bipolar, deeply depressed. But yet, in spite of it, we talked a lot about that, how through suffering comes art. And you can imagine Vincent van Gogh at that time, maybe at his lowest point ever. His failed suicide attempt, his estrangement from Paul Gauguin, the distance between him and Theo. Take a look at the image. There he is sitting in the room of his sanatorium, looking out there in broad daylight when he painted this, remembering what it would have looked like to look out at nighttime at those stars, at that beautiful Provençal countryside. And he added that little sleepy town there. There's something just absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? Transcendent about this image. By looking at this painting, I think you really do see the power of post-impressionist, impressionist and post-impressionist gauziness, let's just call it that. The entire scene is translucent in a way that when you look at it, it's like you're looking through reality into something deeper, right? To me, I almost see in looking at the painting, the Platonic ideal of what countryside, star, and moon might be. Something very eternal, something deeply moving and emotional and passionate about that. Every aspect, the colors are just magnificent, and the broad strokes. The sky. One of the things I love about this painting is the sky is almost the sea. Look at the way that the whirling clouds are really like waves. C.S. Lewis in his science fiction made the point that the heavens were one great swimming ocean of life. And if you go back to the image here, you see that. And I also want to tie this painting in, because it is so famous, so viewed, to the song that was written about it. The American songwriter Don Mclean, who gave us Bye Bye Miss American Pie, was his most famous song, a great piece of songwriting, a great lyricist, Don Mclean, actually wrote, I think, one of the most beautiful songs ever written about art. And he wrote it about Vincent. In fact, the title of the song is Vincent. Take a listen to some of the language in the poem. Starry, starry night, right? Starry, starry night. Paint your palette blue and gray. Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hills. Sketch the trees and the daffodils. Catch the breeze and the winter chills. In colors on the snowy linen land. I got this beautiful, I mean, boy, they sometimes say a picture's worth 1,000 words. In this sense, a word is worth 1,000 pictures. Paint your palette blue and gray to get to the base of that beautiful picture. Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in the souls of whomever has suffered. Paint the shadows on the hills, sketch the trees, the daffodils. But now the second stanza, now I understand, Mclean says, now I get it. Having suffered myself, the songwriter says, now I understand what you tried to say to me and how you suffered for your sanity and how you tried to set them free. Set us free from conventional ways of seeing that make us lose what's beautiful in the world. They would not listen. They did not know how. Maybe they'll listen now, talking about the fact that he's killed himself. And just jump to the last version of this. Starry, starry night. Portraits hung in empty walls, frameless heads on nameless walls, with eyes that watch the world and can't forget, like the strangers that you've met, the ragged men in ragged clothes, the silver thorn, the bloody rose, like crushed and broken on the virgin snow. That image of stark linen white snow, his own blood, a bullet to the belly. And at the very last conclusion, Mclean writes, "Now I think I know what you tried to say to me, and how you suffered for your sanity, and how you tried to set them free. They would not listen, they're not listening still. Perhaps they never will." And perhaps as the rage and the violence and the insensitivity of our culture rolls on, maybe we will never ultimately listen.
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have any questions, please visit freedomproject.com/askduke and ask away. Now, don't forget, the Dr. Duke Show is offered on more than 12 podcast platforms, such as Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. So please subscribe and please leave us that precious 5-star review. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. The 1940 Republican National Convention was the first National Party convention shown on live television. It could be seen on pioneer stations from 3 cities: New York, Philadelphia, and Schenectady.
Schenectady?
Schenectady.
And that's going to do it for the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.